Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Rain fell in heavy sheets, drenching the city of Gotham in a dark, cold mist. Barry Allen, known to the world as the Flash, stood under the dim light of a street lamp staring across the cityscape. Gotham always felt different from Central City, darker, grittier, with an ever-present weight pressing down on it. He'd been here countless times on missions with the Justice League, but tonight his purpose was different. His heart ached as he thought about Bruce Wayne, Batman, the man behind the masks, the one who bore the burdens of the world on his shoulders, with seemingly no one to share the weight. Barry had always admired Bruce's stoic nature, the way he pushed forward, unflinching no matter the cost. But over the years, Barry had also seen the cracks in Bruce's armor, the isolation, the pain buried deep within. Tonight, the idea had come to him suddenly, but once it took hold, it wouldn't let go. Time travel had been both a blessing and a curse for Barry. He'd used it to save his mother once, reversing the tragedy that had defined his life. But that act had almost destroyed everything, reshaping the timeline in ways he hadn't had predicted. He had sworn never to alter the past again, knowing the dangers it posed. But this was different. He told himself this wasn't about him. This was about Bruce, about saving the man who had saved so many. The thought of Bruce as a boy witnessing his parents' murder in that grim alley haunted Barry. It was the kind of pain no one should endure, and if he could stop it, if he could change that one moment, perhaps Bruce could finally find peace. Barry, a deep voice called out from the shadow. Barry turned, and there he was, Bruce in his civilian clothes, but no less imposing than when he wore the cape and cowl. His eyes, as always, were piercing, taking in everything around him. Barry had called him, knowing he couldn't do this without Bruce knowing. He needed Bruce's blessing, though he wasn't sure if he would get it. "You were thinking about going back," Bruce said, his tone flat but with an edge of understanding. "I can see it in your eye." Barry swallowed hard. I am just thinking, Bruce. What if did not have to be this way? What if you didn't have to lose them? Maybe you don't have to be Batman." Bruce's jaw tightened. "I've told you before, Barry, the past is set. Changing it one T make things better. It'll only make them worse. But what if it doesn't?" Barry stepped forward, his voice rising with a mix of desperation and hope. "What if saving you from that night could change everything for the better? You don't have to carry this burden anymore." Bruce's gaze softened, but only for a moment. "It's not about what I want. It's not about what's necessary." "You don't let that believe that." Barry shot back. "You've told me about your nightmares, about the guilt you feel every day. If there's a chance to change that, don't you want to take it?" Bruce looked away, his eyes scanning the city as if searching for something that would never come. "It's not that simple. Gotham needed Batman. It still does. Without that night, I wouldn't have become who I am." "But at what cost?" Barry's voice was low now, pleading. They've given everything for this city. Bruce, maybe it's time to give something back to yourself." Bruce was silent for a long moment. The rain continued to fall, the city below them a blur of lights and shadows. Finally, he spoke, his voice a whisper. "And what about the cost to everyone else? You've seen what happens when the past is altered. The world changes in ways we can't predict." Barry nodded slowly, understanding but unwilling to back down. "I know the risks, but this is different. I've learned from my mistake. I want to make the same ones again. I am asking you to trust me." Bruce's eyes locked onto Barry's ass, and for a second, Barry thought he might have convinced him. This is a path you can take. Trust me, Barry. Some things they need to happen." Barry clenched his fists, frustration bubbling to the surface. "You re-asking me to do nothing, to stand by and watch you suffer for the rest of your life, knowing I could change it. You're not changing it for me," Bruce said coldly. "You're redoing it for yourself because you can. Stand the idea of pain that can be fixed, but this isn't here about you. It's my past, my choice." Barry flinched, but he couldn't deny the truth in Bruce's words. Maybe there was some selfishness in his desire to help to right a wrong that had haunted both of them for so long. But even knowing that Barry couldn't let go of the possibility that things could be better. "I am sorry, Bruce," he said quietly. "I can't just walk away from this." Before Bruce could respond, Barry disappeared in a flash of lightning, leaving the dark night standing alone in the rain. The streets of Gotham in the past were quieter, the buildings older, but the atmosphere the same as city on the brink of darkness. Barry stood in the shadows of Crime Alley, watching from a distance as the young Wayne family exited the Monarch Theater. Thomas Wayne was tall and strong, with the air of a man who had never been afraid of anything. Martha was radiant, holding little Bruce's hand tightly, her love for her son evident in every gesture. Barry's stellar pounded as he watched them walk down the alley. He knew what was supposed to happen next. Joe Chill would step out of the shadows, a desperate man with a gun, and in a few short moments the Waynes would be dead, leaving Bruce alone in the world. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times since deciding to make this trip. He had told himself he would be quick, precise, that he would save the Waynes without altering anything else. But now standing here, his hands trembled with the weight of what he was about to do. Just a few seconds, Barry whispered to himself, "That's all I need." He watched as Joe Chill appeared at the end of the alley, his gun drawn, his eyes wild. Thomas stepped forward, his hand raised, trying to calm the situation. But Barry knew it wouldn't work. It never worked. Time slowed as Barry prepared to act. He could feel the electricity coursing through his veins, ready to propel him forward, to stop this tragedy from unfolding. But something held him back, a voice in his head. Bruce's voice telling him that some things couldn't be changed. But Barry ignored it. He had to, for Bruce, for all the pain his friend had suffered. In an instant, Barry moved. He was a blur faster than the human eye could perceive. He knocked the gun from Joe Chill, hand sending the would-be murderer stumbling backward into the shadow. Thomas and Martha stood frozen in shock, unaware of what had just happened, while little Bruce clung to his mother, Al's leg, confused but unharmed. But as the Waynes walked away, hand in hand, Barry couldn't shake the feeling of dread that began to creep into his mind. He had altered the timeline, and no matter how much he wanted to believe he could control the outcome, he knew deep down that the consequences were coming. When Barry returned to the present, he expected to feel relief, but instead, he was greeted by chaos. Gotham was unrecognizable, a city on fire, its streets overrun by crime and violence. The skyline was dominated by the towering strongholds of villains who had taken control in the absence of Batman. Barry's heart sank as he realized what had happened. Without the tragedy that had created Batman, Gotham had fallen into ruin. Bruce had never donned the cape and cowl, and without his presence, the city had succumbed to the darkness he had fought so hard to keep at bay. And then Barry saw Bruce Wayne standing on the steps of Wayne Tower, but this was not the Bruce he knew. This Bruce was a shadow of the man he had been. He was older, softer, dressed in fine clothes, but with none of the fire or determination that had always defined him. Barry approached slowly, unsure of what to say. When Bruce turned and met his eyes, there was no recognition, only a blank, distant stare. "You did this," Bruce said, his voice hollow. Barry's breath caught in his throat. "Bruce, I was trying to help." "Help?" Bruce let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't help anyone. Barry, you destroyed everything." Barry felt the weight of Bruce's words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had thought saving Thomas and Martha Wayne would give Bruce a new life, a life free from the burden of becoming Batman. Instead, the man standing before him looked broken in a way Barry had never seen before. The vibrant, forceful energy that always radiated from Bruce, even in his darkest moments, was gone. "You destroyed everything." He swallowed hard, his mouth dry, searching for the right thing to say, but no words came. The city around them was a wasteland. The streets of Gotham, usually dark but orderly under Bruce's vigilant watch, were now crawling with crime and chaos. The skyline was littered with signs of destruction, buildings partially collapsed, fires burning in the distance, the unmistakable evidence of a Gotham without its protector. It was worse than Barry had imagined. "Bruce, I thought I could save you." "Sir," Barry said, his voice breaking. "I thought if I could stop that one moment, you wouldn't have to go through all that pain." Bruce turned away from him, staring out over the ravaged city. He stood in silence for a long moment, before speaking again, his voice distant. "You thought saving them would save me, but all you did was take away the thing that made me who I am." Gotham needed Batman. It still does. He looked back at Barry, his eyes hard, full of regret, towering. "And now there's no one left to save it." Barry's stomach twisted. He had known there were risks, but in his heart he had believed things would turn out better. That maybe just this once, altering the past wouldn't lead to disaster. But now, staring into Bruce's hollow eyes, Barry realized the truth. Some tragedies were meant to happen, and his attempt to rewrite fate had only led to a greater tragedy. "I can fix this," Barry said, his voice trembling. "I can go back again. I can put things right." Bruce shook his head. "You don't get it, Barry. It's not about fixing things. You keep trying to undo the pain, but some pain is necessary. Some things have to happen or everything falls apart. You can keep running from it." Barry clenched his fists. "But I am not running, Bruce. I am trying to help. Then help me by not trying to play God." Bruce's voice was cold, but there was an undercurrent of sadness beneath it. "We're not supposed to change the past, no matter how much we want to." Barry's sigh's heart pounded in his chest, a whirlwind of emotions crashing inside him: guilt, sorrow, anger. He had thought he was doing the right thing. He had convinced himself that saving Bruce's parents would bring peace. But now the weight of his mistake was crushing him, and he didn't know how to fix it. "I am sorry," Barry whispered, more to himself than to Bruce. "I thought." "I know what you thought." Bruce interrupted. "You thought you were giving me a gift, but some gifts aren't worth the cost. You've seen what happens when you change the past, Barry. You've lived through it." Barry's mind flashed back to the timeline he had altered, when he saved his own mother, the chaos and devastation that had rippled across the world as a result. He had learned that lesson the hard way, but he had hoped this time would be different. He had hoped saving Bruce's parents would be an exception. Bruce stepped closer to Barry, his expression softening slightly. "I know you meant well, Barry, but you need to let go something. Some tragedies, they define who we are. My parents' deaths shaped me into Batman. Without them, Gotham fell apart. Without Batman, this city was lost." Barry hung his head, the full weight of his actions sinking in. He had been so focused on helping his friend that he hadn't considered the broader consequences. He had taken away the very thing that had made Bruce who he was, and in doing so, he had doomed Gotham. "I'll go back," Barry said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll go back and undo what I did." Bruce nodded, though there was no satisfaction in his eyes. "Still, frail, instead, the only way." Barry didn't say anything more. He couldn't. He had failed his friend, failed Gotham, failed himself. The only thing left to do was to try and fix it, to restore the timeline to what it should have been. Without another word, Barry turned and vanished in a blur of lightning, leaving Bruce alone once again. The familiar sight of Crime Alley greeted Barry as he stepped out of the time stream back to the night that had started it all. The young Bruce Wayne and his parents were just leaving the theater, unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. Barry stood in the shadows, his heart heavy with dread. He had already saved them once, but now he had to stand by and watch it happen. Watch the event that would tear Bruce's life apart. The event that had to happen, no matter how much it hurt. Joe Chill stepped out of the shadows, just as he had before. Barry could see it all happening in slow motion. Every detail burned into his mind from the first time he had intervened. Thomas stepped forward, trying to reason with the man. Martha clutched Bruce tightly, her eyes wide with fear. Barry could stop it. He could save them again. But this time, he didn't move. He forced himself to stay still, even as every fiber of his being screamed at him to act. The gunshot rang out, shattering the night. Thomas Wayne fell to the ground, his life snuffed out in an instant. Martha screamed, but it was cut short as the second shot echoed through the alley. Bruce's small, terrified form was the only thing left standing in the alley as his parents lay dead beside him. Barry clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he didn't move. He couldn't teach he had made his choice. This was how it had to be. When Barry returned to the present, the city was quiet. Gotham's skyline, while still dark and imposing, was familiar again. It was the Gotham he'd known, and the one where Batman prowled the streets, keeping the shadows at bay. He found Bruce waiting for him on the rooftop of Wayne Tower. This time, he was dressed in his Batman suit, the cowl pulled back as he watched over the city. "You did it," Bruce said, not looking at Barry. "GT, the timeline is back to what it should be." Barry nodded, though he didn't feel the relief he had hoped for. The memory of the Wayne's death was fresh in his mind, and the knowledge that he had allowed it to happen, even knowing it was necessary, gnawed at him. "I'm sorry," Barry said softly. I thought I could fix it." Bruce turned to face him, his expression unreadable fear. "I know, but some things aren't meant to be fixed." Barry wanted to say more, to apologize again, to explain his reasons, but he stopped himself. Bruce already knew he understood better than anyone the weight of responsibility, the burden of choices that couldn't be undone. For a long time, the two heroes stood in silence, watching the city below. Gotham was safe again, at least for now, but the cost had been steep, and Barry knew that some wounds, even those healed by time, would never fully fade. Finally, Bruce spoke. "You can save everyone, Barry, no matter how fast you run." "I know," Barry replied, "but I wanted to save you." "You did," Bruce said, quietly, "just not in the way you thought." Barry glanced at Bruce, but his friend's eyes were fixed on the horizon, the weight of their shared experiences hanging in the air between them. The story had come full circle. The past was intact. Gotham was as it was meant to be. And yet the ache in Barry's chest remained. With a heavy heart, Barry knew that this was the price of being a hero, the eternal struggle between wanting to save everyone and knowing that some things, no matter how painful, had to remain unchanged.